All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here at AI Workforce Summit. I'm really excited for this session. We're going to be talking about the differences between like copilots and agents and workers and really digging into the different use cases. And we have a great panel of speakers here today, which I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And Daniel from Relevance AI, if you would like to go first, that'd be amazing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having us and looking forward to this conversation today. So I'm Daniel, one of the co-founders of Relevance, and we're an AI workforce platform. Simply put, we enable customers to build and deploy AI agents that complete end-to-end tasks autonomously on autopilot. Our goal is to ensure that teams are only limited by their ideas, and we don't want them to be limited by their size. So we give them this extra lever that they can pull when they want to do more with less, especially something that's very top of mind for a lot of people today. We achieve this specifically with a horizontal platform because just like hiring employees, we really believe that every agent needs to be customized and configured for that specific organization, for that specific role. And some of our flagship use cases include our BDR agent Bosch in sales, helping automate that top of funnel, whether it's outbound or inbound. We do stuff on support, we do stuff on marketing as well. But again, the key piece there is that being a workforce platform, we want that customization, we want that configuration. Just like when you hire someone, you don't want to bring them on and then to do the things from their old company. You want them to do things at your company. And so that's a really crucial aspect of our platform.
I really love that analogy of bringing someone on. You don't want them to have the old bad habits from their old company. You want them to be doing the things you want them to your organization. So I'm super excited to dig into some of your more agent-specific stuff here in a minute. Next up, Kyle from Copy.ai. I'm so excited you're here. We've chatted a few times and really excited to talk about AI workers and agents with you.
Always a pleasure, Sarah. Thanks again for having me. I'm Kyle. I lead the marketing team here at Copy.ai, and we're a go-to-market AI platform, very similar in many ways to what Daniel just talked through, helping companies codify their best practices in what we call AI workflows, and then extend those workflows across their entire organization so that you can fully automate some things, really streamline other things, and just get tremendous business value out of AI. And we're specifically focused on going super deep on AI for go-to-market teams. And the way to think about this is you open up your marketing playbook, SDR, sales, CS, operations playbook to any page. The pages in those playbooks are just processes. And those processes right now are executed by humans. Well, what if you could execute those processes in some form, partially or fully, with AI and the business value that you get from that? And that's what we help our customers do.
Amazing. And then last, but obviously most certainly not least, Sunil is joining us from Tribble. Sunil, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. And hello, everyone. Sunil Rao. I'm the CEO of Tribble. And similar to the first two gentlemen, the company we're building really is focusing in on building an agent, but really going deep into workflows of a specific role within a company. So even within go-to-market, specifically looking at roles like sales engineers, proposal managers, and really digging into the workflows of those individuals and starting to automate percentages of those workloads as an agent, as a digital teammate that you can hit up to get specific tasks on the team done. So we're really taking a more personified approach, but we really believe going deeper into that workflow allows us to be more effective at those specific tasks.
Amazing. So even in those introductions, we heard a lot of different terminology used. There was workers, there's agents, there's co-pilots. We've heard that term before. So what I want to kick this session off with is for everyone here that's listening, where are there differences in these terminologies? Like, is a co-pilot different than an agent? Is different than a worker? Or are they synonymous? Are they interchangeable? So I'd love to just get all of your takes on these different terms that we're hearing a lot in the market right now and how we should be thinking about them. So Sunil, I would love to hear your take first on how you think about these different terms that we're hearing a lot in the market right now.
Yeah, I'll give you the perspective that we as Tribble had. Even our product has evolved quite a bit in the course of the last year. I think, Sarah, when we last spoke, we had a version of the product out. We were very focused on the RFP workflow within the role of an SE. Very specifically, you're getting RFP'd by customers, typically need to have some deep product knowledge, functional knowledge to answer those questions. So the product we first put out in the market was actually a Chrome extension. It was a Copilot. So it's actually assisting the human who's doing the job in a web browser or within an application, helping them complete that task. And they're kind of ferrying information over. It's going out, doing some work, coming back, getting the information, and they're porting it back. When we think about Copilot, we kind of talk about it that way, where it's an assist to the human. When we talk about agent, we actually look at it as, hey, can we hand over some of this work directly to the Tribble agent? And in this exact workflow for the RFP, we actually allow the users to send a file over via the conversational platform And Tribble just takes it off like an intern would, takes a first stab at it, figures out whatever problems it runs into, and comes back with a completed file with the answers in the right place. So when we think agent, it's more end-to-end workflows, I would say. When we think Copilot, it's more of an intercept into the existing workflow of the user.
Very interesting. Kyle, do you agree with that? Do you see any differences within either your own product or sort of like what you're seeing on the market?
Yeah, on the whole, I would say, Sunil, we're more or less on the same page. I would say we take a slightly different approach where we think about agents as performing a multi-step act. And so, as an example, as part of our account intelligence workflow that builds a really comprehensive account plan for sales teams, there is an agent embedded in that workflow who is a research agent who's been trained on how to do all the things that an intern or an offshore company or an SDR in-house would do to understand what's going on inside of this company. Run the 50 different Google searches, search these different trade publications, do all of these things that a research agent would do. Now, that's one step in the workflow. There are other steps that are necessary to create a full account plan. So agents, I think, can be end-to-end. They could be a sub-component of an entire process, but I think multi-step is the right way to think about it. Copilot, to me, especially the Copilot that most people are familiar with, like the ChatGPT type Copilot experience, is more one-off task, and frankly is a pretty frustrating experience for a lot of, I'll speak specifically about go-to-market because that's what I spend the most time on. It's pretty frustrating for go-to-market teams when their CEO is like, our AI strategy is everybody gets a ChatGPT license. And they're like, what? I have to go learn how to prompt? And so I've seen a lot of people, a lot of folks will say that generative AI right now is in the quote-unquote trough of disillusionment, where we were so excited about the transformational value that you're going to get from these companies, and then you went and got a ChatGPT enterprise license, and now you're in this disillusioned trough where you're like, I don't know how to do this. And so that kind of Copilot experience that's super general and requires everybody inside of a company to develop a new set of skills, it ain't going to happen. Like, it's just not going to happen. So I think everything that Daniel and Sunil have talked about so far is about how can you go much more sophisticated than that and develop an experience, if it's a Copilot or agent or whatever experience, that's much more, less general purpose and much more focused on solving something specific for a specific person, team, department, or company. And that, to me, is what a real agent or a real Copilot will do to deliver real business value.
I like that. And you mentioned the trough of disillusionment. And I think it's crazy. We're calling it like the AI era here at Qualified. And it's crazy that I think we're in like different, I've never been in an era where they're in like different phases. Like the AI worker one seems like it's at like peak, but like some of this AI Copilots, like the trough of disillusionment, like I feel like it's like in all different places, which is wild. Daniel, you guys obviously have agents. I'm curious to get your take on this as far as like agents versus Copilots and that terminology that's being used.
Yeah, I think what Sunil and Kyle covered is really helpful. The lens we have is like one step back a little bit, where like we actually look at everything through this notion of a Copilot or an autopilot. I think for most buyers out there in the market right now, if you start Googling one of those terms like AI agents, AI workers, AI employees, you'll get Copilots, you'll get them all mixed up. So I think when you're evaluating software, right, or you're looking for solutions in this, if you can start thinking about them, is this a Copilot or an autopilot? It's a really helpful way, I think, to distinguish the kinds of products out there. And like Carl was mentioning, we really believe that autopilots are places where you can make dynamic decisions, multi-steps. It's not a static workflow. The days of RPA where you had a if this then that, that's gone now, right? With agents, you can actually have it go on autopilot, which means it can make dynamic decisions based on the scenario it has in front of it. And we have a bit of a controversial opinion on this at Relevance. We actually think that for Copilots, it's a bit of a short-term trend. I think for every single vertical or functional role that autopilot gets good enough, people are going to prefer that because simply it lifts more of the effort from your team to the autopilot and lets your team actually not be encumbered by an assistant and actually have something they can delegate to. You don't see people in companies having teams just full of assistants. They have people they can delegate to. And I think the AI workforce is a very similar pattern, so that you want to delegate to an autopilot, which can go do work, obviously come back and escalate to you. For us, one of the kind of flagship features that we really focus on is our approval and escalation process. How can we make sure that these autopilots can come back, raise their hand, and ask for help when they need it, just like a person you delegate to? And so I think for us, it's a Copilot versus autopilot. We really are building for the autopilot. We think that's going to come faster than we think. And Coachy did a really good report on this in November. If anyone wants to see the State of AI report, where they looked at past examples of where Copilots, chess was one example they actually used. People thought humans plus machine will be the machine for a very, very long time. It was actually in a couple of years before the machine became better than the human plus the machine, right? So there's certain use cases where those autopilots are really critical. And I think when you're evaluating, just bucketing them up in those two categories is a really helpful way. If you're a little bit confused right now about the terminology, because it's probably going to take a couple of years before this terminology becomes better defined and kind of better adhered to by companies out there.
I think that's fantastic advice. And it's a really good segue for the next question that I have for you, Daniel. You mentioned when you did your introduction of Relevance, you guys have some like predefined agents within your organization, but then there's also, you kind of said like sky's the limit. Like we want people to be able to build their own agents for whatever their company or their use cases are. If someone here is listening to this and they're like, I'm not sure if I want to buy like one of those personified agents that we're seeing on the market, or I feel like I have a very unique use case that I need to build something for, when is the right time to use one or the other? When is the right time to like get one that's fully built out and baked, like the company's done it for you, versus like, when's the right time for me to go in and put in the work to build something custom to myself?
Yeah, so at Relevance, we kind of broadly define those two personas as recruiters and builders. So ultimately, we think every single company is going to have these builders in the company, which are going to be able to manage and deploy the AI workforce for their organization. I think that's, as maturity grows, that's going to become the de facto way of doing business. It's going to be a critical role part of the business that people are going to be builders. But given where we are today, it's a very new concept. It's quite hard to do. We're really on the, we look at what we can achieve with Relevance for agents. We always think to ourselves, we're very much on the cutting edge of what's possible. This will get easier every year, every month. They'll become more capable. And whilst we're in this phase, I think it's extremely useful for people to have a starting point. That's, a great place for them to kind of see the benefit, see the value, get buy-in from the organization. I think the biggest question we get, does it work? And so being able to show the organization it works for a specific functional role or use case, a specific workflow like Kyle's mentioning, a specific process, that's a really powerful thing. That gets you a lot of buy-in. It lets you achieve a lot of things. And then you can invest to do this in more areas of the business. So kind of the viewpoint we take on that at Relevance, we do believe everyone's going to be a builder, but we want to serve the recruiters today. And the best way to serve those recruiters is give them a flagship template that can be a starting point for them to build on. Now, as part of our DNA, we want to customize, we want to configure. Every customer's BOSH or BDR agent is going to be different. People do research in different places. We don't want a black box thing that just goes to LinkedIn, pulls some, your new title and now says congratulations on your new role, right? If you're looking for those solutions, I think that's a lot of what personified agents are doing today. That's not, to me, not a true autopilot. A true autopilot is what, was being mentioned before about having those multi-steps, being able to make dynamic decisions, but those decisions and actions being made based on your process. Are you checking X for real research about your business? How are you using your CRM? How are you using the other tools? And so that's really mimicking what your employees do. They sit down, they've got a plethora of tools, they've got a bunch of decisions they make as part of their job. Let's define one of those jobs to be done. Let's start with a kind of a template for an agent. Let's customize it to that, and then let's go from there. And once you have that buy-in, it becomes very easy to build lots of use cases. And we see that expanding very rapidly throughout the organization. So our customers who start with a single use case very, very quickly start moving into others, whether that's on go-to-market, going from outbound to inbound to database farming, whether that's going to another team, lifecycle marketing, that's a big one that's picking up right now. So I think for most people out there, think of your starting point and then build up from there. Find something that's operationally expensive right now, but has a clear, repeatable job to be done. And that's a great entryway. But ultimately, we obviously want you to be a builder. And I think that's what you should be thinking about. How are you not locking yourself in today to make sure that in a year or two, when you need to have a much broader set of agents, that you have that ability to expand?
That's super helpful. And Kyle, I'm curious, you've talked before about templates. Like I know that's something Copy.ai is really good at, is templates. Is that something that you, like, have you seen that? I feel like you guys have built out a lot of those. So is that something you agree with, or do you have like a different take there?
Very similar take. I would say the way that we think about the templatization of these workflows is that there are some processes from company A to B to C that are more or less the same. So Daniel mentioned the account research. Let's just keep going down that route, because I'm sure a lot of the listeners here are familiar with that BDR work or that sales team work. More similar than it is different from company 1 to 2. And so you can have a really nice templated workflow that gets you 70 or 80% of the way there. But then to Daniel's point, you need some sort of means of customization to make sure that you can get as close to 100% as possible, so that when you are deploying that agent or when you are deploying that workflow inside your CRM, it's delivering the full set of value that's bespoke for your business. So the templatization of these workflows is really critical. It just depends on how similar the processes are from company A to B. things get a lot more complicated on the marketing side. And of course, there are other sales use cases that are more complicated. But like the marketing side is really hard. The way that company A approaches thought leadership, totally different than the way company B approaches thought leadership. So to some extent, we can provide some sort of templatized workflow, but there's a lot more customization that's required there. So when Daniel talks about the builders, I totally agree. Like these are going to be super high leverage people that every company is going to hire. The way that we think about it is similar to Daniel, is a go-to-market AI architect. You need to have the domain expertise of what makes for an effective process, and you need to have the AI expertise to be able to design and deploy the prompts correctly so that you can put all of these processes together into a workflow that is then deployed across your company. And I think that combination of human strategy, outsource to AI to get a lot done is extremely important. But I think it almost always requires human on the back end, at least right now, human on the back end to sense check and do the last mile fit and finish and polish type stuff to make sure that the work product is as perfect as it needs to be for prospecting or marketing content or whatever it may be.
Absolutely. Sunil, I have a question for you that I've been really excited to chat about, which is, I've heard a lot of different things on the market. And this is funny. I feel like this session is just for my own edification of the questions that I've had. And I'm hoping that people listening are also going to find value in this, which is we hear a lot about agents that can do like multiple parts of a role. Like you guys have a digital engineer that you've talked about at Tribble that can obviously do, you talked about like step-by-step, they're doing multiple things. Versus, I know there's also agents on the market that like hone in on one specific part of a role or one specific part of a job description. Can you just give me your take on like when is the right time to have one that does that full end-to-end versus like when's the right time to have an agent that focuses on one particular task within an organization? Are there pros to cons to either that you've seen?
Yeah, I think I'll share how we're looking at it. And, by all means, I think the space is evolving so fast, and the other folks in the panel will agree that even, the level of capability of some of the foundational models that are coming out and what they can do is changing at such a rapid pace that our best thesis at this point is, I look back even in my own experience at, my previous roles building vertical specific software. And there was a need to build software very focused on specific industries, going deep into the business process of specific subverticals. And that was always in contrast to the horizontal, off-the-shelf, more configurable software. There was always this build versus buy discussion. I think now what's changed is the build part of the equation is becoming far more easier for most people and broadly applicable within the company, right? So this tooling becomes something a lot more people within the enterprise can use to build applications, i.e. agents, copilots, the next generation of software. Whereas it was restricted before. So for us, the trade-off has always been, when we hone in on a specific persona, a specific role in the company, how much more of that task can we complete? To Kyle's point, multi-step end-to-end with a level of efficacy that it can actually displace a unit of human work in that role. So if we hone in on a specific person within a company in a specific role, then can we do one task really, really, really well and do it out of the box as consistently as possible within a specific subvertical? So it's almost, once again, it's the horizontal applicability versus really going deep within one vertical, one business process, and just nailing that consistently and then trying to grow that out. So we've definitely taken that approach. And, when we think about where to think, which roles it makes sense to take that approach. Well, when it's a really high leverage task or there's a huge operational cost associated with it, like for us, we picked sales engineering, one, because I used to be an SE at Salesforce before I started this, and my co-founder as well. And two, we know that there's always never enough of them in any go-to-market team, and they're a high leverage role. So it seemed to make sense that if we free up a very specific unit of time for them, that has an impact on the org. And it also is a business process that these companies are used to buying software for. That's the other thing. It's really hard to have conversations where we're coming in and talking about this new transformative platform. It's a longer sales cycle because you're also educating your customer on what this is and how to roll it out. Whereas what we found success with is really nailing a specific area where they're buying legacy software and one-to-one displacing it and having a 10x to 100x impact on just that one business process. So it really matters what you're selling and the capability. I gave it from the perspective of what Tribble's doing, but I'm sure, when you go more general purpose, there's different ways to work it.
Absolutely. Now, Kyle, I've got a question for you. I know kind of what Copy.ai is really focused on is like streamlining parts of the go-to-market process. But what's interesting about it is, as we're talking about AI agents and AI workers, obviously this is very AI focused, but humans have to be involved. Like, I think that's something that everyone is agreeing that humans have to stay involved in this process. I would love to get your take on where that is in the process. As you bring on AI agents or AI workers to help streamline things, What do they take on, and what do we leave for humans to still manage?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sarah. And I think it's a continuation of what Sunil and Daniel were just talking about. And let's use Sunil's example. Like, Sunil has the domain expertise from being a sales engineer at Salesforce to know what is required to complete an RFP response. If you just go to ChatGPT right now and you ask it to try and complete an RFP, no chance are you going to get anything of value there. No chance. Like, it's probably going to create more headaches than it's going to solve. And so what in this, where we are right now in this era of AI, and probably this will be the case for a long time, is you need some sort of domain expert defining what the workflow is. So what are the steps in responding to that RFP? Where do you go to find that information? How do you distill that information and then complete that in a way that makes sense for teams? And the same is true for content creation. If you are an SEO expert, you need to have a codification of your process in order to scale it via AI. You can't just go to ChatGPT and say, write me an SEO optimized blog post. It's not going to work. It's way more complicated than that. And the landscape of SEO optimized content is always changing. And so you need somebody who's able to codify what their process is. When I write a long form piece of SEO content, here's what I do. I Google it. I look at the top 3 search results. I read all the H2s. I brainstorm people, also ask questions. I do this, and this. I create a content brief. I then take that brief and turn it into long form content. Here's how I layer in my value prop. Like, it's many steps. And this is why it takes days or weeks to turn around a piece of SEO content, because it's a lot of work. But if the SEO expert takes the time to codify their process in AI, then you can go reuse that over and over and over again. So human strategy on the front end. And like I mentioned before, even if the SEO expert goes and codifies all that process really beautifully, the output still isn't good. Like, it's not good enough. We typically see that our rule of thumb is for every 1,000 words that AI writes, you need to spend about 30 minutes editing, rule of thumb. So if it's a 3,000 word piece on SEO content, you're looking at an hour and a half of editing to get it across the line. And why is that? It's because these models are probabilistic. They're not perfect. They can't follow instructions perfectly, especially for long form content. And so there always has to be, right now at least, human on the back end to do the last mile work. The AI is going to get you into the red zone. You need the human to get you across the goal line.
Absolutely. And speaking of humans, I'm going to go back to this as like a larger group question here that I would love to hear from each of you on, which is, as we're talking more about agents and workers, it's only a matter of time, if not, it's already happening, that people are going to bring these onto their team. How are we managing those workers? Like, you talked about humans there, Kyle, so maybe this is just a continuation of your question, then I can go to Daniel and Sunil, but who is managing these agents or workers? Is there one person that's managing them? Is it someone that we're going to like, is it a new role that's hiring these people and like managing these people? Or how are you guys thinking about that internally, or seeing your customers manage these agents?
Yeah, I'll defer probably more so to Daniel on this, because I think he's given this more thought. But my general take is what we've already mentioned before, which is there is going to be what we call a go-to-market AI architect, what Daniel calls a builder. There's going to be those people. They're probably functionally oriented, because they have to have that combination. I know I sound like a broken record, but I believe they have to have the combination of the domain expertise and the AI expertise. I don't want somebody who is a software engineer managing my workflows for my go-to-market team. They don't have the domain enough. Most of them don't have enough domain expertise to do that effectively. So I think it needs to be a combination, and I see these AI architects embedded across different functions inside of the organization. I'm really curious to hear Daniel's take on this.
You too.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time thinking about this actually, because it kind of defines how we build our product. Like for a lot of what we do, the reason why the decisions we make are actually very closely aligned to what Kyle was just saying there about the software engineer. If we think about software, typically you have some domain experts with a bunch of engineers who are building a great product to serve the market. When we talk about agents that are functionally doing a lot of the work that humans do, which is very dynamic, very flexible, very different, it's really difficult to codify that in terms of like a specific kind of like an RPA style codification, where it's like if this then that, which is what software is. Software is deterministic. And therefore, if you are set up to have engineers building this, you're kind of going to fail, because engineers are not going to be able to handle those nuances and not going to be able to handle all those different little pieces and points for every single team, every single person, organization, which becomes exponentially more difficult when you have a larger organization. So what we've done is, in order to try kind of combat that, is make sure that the agent building experience is designed for the subject matter experts We want to bring that expertise down as much as possible so that the people who have the skills can distill them down into the agents. And the people who know how to evaluate it can also evaluate the output in the same way that a manager is evaluating their junior employees' work, in the same way that a sales enablement person is coaching their sales team on how to do something. We want to distill those expertise into the agent, and we want to have those same people managing it. That being said, we're seeing this really interesting trend with our customers right now. The ones who are starting to think about what does the next 12, 24 months look like for us are starting to think of this almost like an AI workforce manager role. We've already got one customer actually who's just basically promoted they were initially in RevOps. They started out the project on the go-to-market side. They now promoted them into more of an AI workforce manager role. And their role is actually to work with the other kind of, in their business, RevOps equivalent in other teams, personas, to help educate them on how they should be deploying this for their teams. So we're kind of having these leaders within each team, within this AI workforce manager, which is like a go-to who can help, cross the gap on some of the, the knowledge pieces that they're missing for those other teams. And so we're seeing this really interesting trend where I think a lot of these companies are going to have this expertise internally that can help disseminate across the organization, but ultimately it has to remain within those teams. You don't have engineers hiring your SDRs. You don't have engineers hiring your new marketing person. Why would they be building the agent which does that role? You have to have the same teams function on that. And so for us, it feels very much like it's going to stay in those places. And so you're going to need people in those teams who are a little bit more comfortable with a more technical side. Sales engineers, RevOps people, like these kind of personas tend to be really good in sales. You have a lot of these similar pieces in other functions who can take kind of the flag and push the team forward. But it has to be deployed throughout that organization because, as Kyle said, if you don't have the domain expertise, what are you doing? Like, can your engineer go and sell to someone new? Like, if they can't do that, then why are they building it? I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Sunil, are you seeing the same thing with your sales engineer? Is it like a sales team that's managing that, or have you seen any like different management type things within your either your company or your customers?
Yeah, I think, in most cases, what's been interesting to see is a lot of companies have also stood up essentially they're calling AI councils. Like, how do I procure this software? And starting to rationalize across use cases, and then also determining who are the owners of the software once it's been procured. How do you continue to maintain and manage it? And I keep coming back to this build versus buy, because I think when you have more of a horizontal platform, like what Daniel and Kyle are talking about in some cases, you might have a broader function that needs to manage multiple processes. Or when you're purchasing something like Tribble, we're specifically going in and saying, hey, it's mimicking the role of the sales engineer, the proposal manager. So it's augmenting the existing team, and it becomes part of that team. So you continue to manage it as you would a team member on that team, because we try to minimize the workload on the team to actually build part of the product. So we're more out of the box, if you will, as opposed to it being a little bit more general purpose to make it fit more use cases. So in that case, for us, the implementation and rollout really is, hey, how do we get the team to understand how to use the product? How do we put it in their hands, drive adoption that way, and roll it out? So it's a little bit, once again, I keep coming back to horizontal, vertical, right? Because I think there is this, when it's much more purpose-built, the way you get into the hands of folks and roll it out is different. Now, I will say the idea of actually measuring what the thing is doing, however, is relevant, right? And I think, one of the things Daniel was talking about is really interesting, because sometimes multi-step agent is a black box. So it's like, you want to ask, if you give a task to an employee and you say, hey, get this done, they come back and they get it done. You're like, wait, what did you do? What is that debug log of exactly how you executed the steps you needed to do in order to get that task done? Where'd you learn how to do that? You shouldn't have done step number 7. So, how do you make that relevant or available to the users that are managing this process? For us, is a really important piece. So we launched this capability called Tribaletics, which is essentially like opening the hood on why did I make the decisions I made to get to what I need to. And I think there's a flavor of that needs to exist in any tool, especially when it gets in these multi-step systems that are going off and doing things that make some people very uneasy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are almost out of time. This has been such an incredible session. I appreciate you guys so much coming on and talking about this with us. For anyone who's listening, if you want to learn more about Tribble or Copy.ai or Relevance AI and the agents that they have, we actually have an AI worker job fair here, which we mentioned in the beginning. Go check them out. They have booths. You can learn a little bit more about what they do and go visit their websites to learn more. So guys, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been fantastic.